Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Firstly, guys, a blessed Feast of Nativity and a Happy New Year to you guys. I haven't seen many of you since the feast. Thanks for inviting me to come and speak tonight. I was actually asked by Mark to talk about something in relation to the New Year. So I thought, fantastic, that's befitting because we're only a couple of weeks into the New Year. But I was trying to think of what could be sort of a good topic to cover. And I hope this talk, is on the right track, but we'll see how we go. But let's make it more of a discussion because I don't really enjoy talking, to be honest. So if you interrupt me, I'll be more than happy to hear what you have to say as well. So the title is Making 2016 Count. And so the whole idea was revolves around resolutions. And, the beginning of the year is an exciting time because it's a time of renewal and new beginnings, and it's a time where we look back to the past and we see how we can change or what we can do to become a better person, whether that be physically or spiritually or mentally, and that's where the whole idea of setting resolutions comes in. I saw this meme that I thought was quite funny. It's about the gym in December. So when you go to the gym in December, and the picture is just an empty gym. There's no one there. It's pristine. And then it shows you after January the 1st. And what does the gym look like? It looks like the Boxing Day sales. Everyone's jumping over everyone, and there's weights everywhere. And that's what it's like. When it comes to the new year, we get motivated to do things, we get motivated to act and to try and improve our lives. Yeah, so one of the things that I want to talk about, actually, before we get into it, is why is it that things are usually great in the beginning of January, and then by the end of January, things are sort of stagnant, and then, a couple of months down the track, we even forget what our resolutions were. And I think the issue that it comes down to is that we've got good intentions. So we genuinely want to improve our lives, whether it be spiritually or physically or whatever else. But sometimes good intentions aren't enough. And so hopefully we'll look at why good intentions are just not enough, particularly from a spiritual sense. And then what we can do about it practically to actually get back on track and make a difference this year in our spiritual lives, hopefully. Can I ask for a confession? How many of you guys, I'll confess to you, how many of you guys have set spiritual resolutions? Let's just direct spiritual resolutions. How many of us have set just resolutions, whether it be to eat, healthier or start, getting fitter at the gym or read more or, whatever it may be. Whether you've done that mentally or you wrote it down. Yeah? Okay, beautiful. Keep those hands up. Because I want to ask you, how many of you guys, including myself, have spiritual resolutions in that list? So keep your hands up if they're spiritual. Beautiful. So pretty much all of us. And then how many of us now, that we're 15 days into the new year, have stuck to our spiritual resolutions? So the ones that have kept their hands up, you can leave all, better yet, Matthew. Matthew's okay? Maybe come and give the topic. Because it's hard. And I'm not going to tell you what the statistics are, but in fact, it's actually, it's going to get harder and harder. And those who can keep their resolutions going, you're actually one of the very few. And that's credit to those who have kept their hands up. So let's have a look at why intentions are just not enough. And we'll focus on our spiritual resolutions, but this can apply to anything else in life, really. So, has anyone heard of John C. Maxwell? He's a leadership coach in the US. Yeah, motivational speaker and leadership coach. He says this. He says a good intention is a great idea, but without any consistent action. A good intention is a great idea without any consistent action. What does he mean by that? So I'll give you an example. Let's say I went to the beach and I wanted to go for a swim off the pier. And I went for a swim, and then I got caught in a rip, and I'm stuck out in the middle of nowhere, and I needed somebody to save me. And let's say, thankfully, there's two people who are standing on the pier and they've noticed that I'm out there drowning. I'm not a great swimmer, to be honest. Let's say that the first guy has good intentions. So he looks at me drowning, basically, and thinks to himself, oh, I wish I could help this man. I wish I could jump in there. Hopefully somebody else can help him. Someday I want to be, able to help people just like this poor guy and whatever else. Whilst he's thinking all these things, the guy next to him jumps right in, swims to me, and hopefully saves me, and drags me out of the beach. Who am I going to be thankful for? The guy with the good intentions, or the guy with the good intentions plus the action? Obviously the second guy, as long as he saves me. So that's the difference. Good intentions are great, but on their own, they're not going to last. Now, the key word that John Maxwell uses is consistent action. So this is where the issue arises, is in the new year, we've got resolutions, and we say, spiritual resolutions can be, I'm going to read the Bible in a year. I'm going to start from January the 1st. Or I'm going to pray the morning prayer and the midnight and the prayer before sleeping. I'm going to attend church services and whatever else. These are all great things to do, and that's what we should be striving for, because we want to improve our relationship with God. But without consistent action, once reality sets in and once the emotions set in, it gets harder and harder. Because the problem is, good intentions, like we said, are great, but they're heavily reliant on our emotion. And our emotions, as you guys know, they're like a roller coaster. So you have good days, you have bad days, and whatever else. And that will affect. So our intentions won't last. Now these are the key words that I've put up there. Desire, wish, hopefully, someday. These are words that, when somebody's got good intentions, they generally tend to rely on words like these. Do you notice anything about words like these? Are they familiar to you when you try to change? They're very good words. They mean well, but they're very passive words. They don't require us to actually get up and commit to an action, right? Now the devil's very happy with this. The devil doesn't care if I've got good intentions, right? The devil's only going to care if I actually do something about it. The devil's only going to care if I'm continuously trying to improve my relationship with God. So the verse in Ephesians 5:15 to 16, we're told, see then that you walk circumspectly, which means cautiously, not as fools but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. And the words that really pop out for me and really sort of strike me are the last few words. Be sure to redeeming the time because the days are evil. Basically, what is it saying? Do you guys have an idea of what we're being told here?
The fools lose days, whereas the wise gain.
Exactly. Beautiful. So we've got a certain number of days in life. God created me, breathed life into me, and I'm here for a number of days. Literally, they're numbered. But the difference between the foolish and the wise is what we do with those days. So resolutions are important now, based on what this is saying. So, what's the difference then? What can I do? Having good intentions is not necessarily the best thing to do. It's good to have, but it's not on its own. So the next thing to do is to actually, rather than have good intentions, it's to be intentional. Now look at these words. These are the words that are associated with being intentional. So words such as action, purpose, definitely, today, things associated with planning, and whatever else. These are the words that we need to be thinking about, because these are words that get us to commit ourselves to something. Now, I've put a picture of a swimmer up there. Does anybody know anything about professional athletes, especially swimmers? Has anyone had any experience with professional athletes? I've read an article about a professional swimmer in the US, and he was describing his daily routine. And he was saying that his daily routine would begin at 3 or 4 in the morning, depending on when he can get up, to do a couple of hours of laps. Not a couple of laps, a couple of hours. And this is just his exercise and his warm-up and whatever else. Then he meets with his coach, where they actually sit in an office and they actually talk about drills, and he basically gets coached as to what techniques he needs to learn and what he needs to practice and whatever else. After that, in the evening, he'll go back to the pool with his coach and try these drills over and over and over again. And the whole idea is that he needs to be in a position where he doesn't need to think about acting. He needs to be in a position where he can just act. The second that siren goes off, he doesn't need to think, oh, I need to jump in the water now. The second that siren goes off, he's already on his way into the water. And then St. Paul draws on this idea, and I'm sure we've read this verse many times. So the Holy Spirit, through St. Paul, is speaking to us, and this is St. Paul saying, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith, and I don't know the rest. He talks about laid up for me is a crown of righteousness, but not only for him, for the rest of us. You know what the crown of righteousness is? You know what the crown is actually? Sorry. For nowadays, if you win a race in a competition, you get a medal. Back in the time, in St. Paul's time, they actually used to be given crowns. So they weaved crowns. So he's saying, rather than winning a crown in the Olympics or whatever else, I've already, and is laid up for me the crown of righteousness which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. And not only to me, this sort of applies to us, but also to all who have loved his appearing. So you see, in that sense, we're all athletes. And as athletes, we're not expected to just sort of float through life and expect that, it's a journey, let's enjoy the journey, and at the end of the journey, where we end up, we end up. No, he's trying to set the mood and say, life isn't just a journey to enjoy. Of course, you're here to enjoy life, and that's the beauty of God creating us for this earth. But we're here on a mission, and we're here for a limited time, and so we need to make the most of it. Now, when it comes to setting spiritual resolutions, one of the things, I'm not speaking from experience, so one of the things that I found the struggle is I'll start strong. For example, with prayer, I'll say that to you every morning, every night, whenever before meals, you name it. You can be praying consistently. But then what happens a couple of weeks down the track, when it gets a little bit harder to keep that motivation, when the new year sort of settles down and you're faced with reality now, and you're back to work, which adds to things, and whatever else, life continues. What tends to happen is if I'm not feeling God's presence when I'm praying, or if I'm reading the Bible and I can't feel God's presence, I tend to lose the motivation and I tend to drop out quickly. But this is something that we need to be careful with, and this is probably the biggest issue for our spiritual life. And so the words here are, your relationship with God is essential for your salvation and not your satisfaction. So I pray every morning, not because it gives me satisfaction, although it will give me satisfaction, but I pray because it's essential to my salvation, because being united with God is salvation for me. That is a process of sanctification. Does that make sense? Has anyone else experienced that, or am I the only one that's in trouble? You've experienced that? Okay. I thought what we can do is actually look at some of the saints. And I've got here an example on St. John Chrysostom. Do you guys know his life story? Or so? Yeah. This is an example of intention, right? So St. John, when he was younger, he sort of lived a normal life, enjoyed himself, and whatever else. And then he got serious about his spiritual life at one stage, and he fell in love with God, literally. And so his solution was to spend the rest of his life with God. He wanted to run to the monastery. He wanted to become a monastic. Okay? But at the time, his father had passed away, and so he was taking care of his mother. And his mother pleaded with him not to leave. She said to him, basically, I'm a widow as it is, and you're now the man of the house. If you leave, you're going to make me a widow again. And so she convinced him to stay until she went home, passed on, and he stayed. But the beautiful thing about the story is St. John just didn't stay at home and basically, mope and sort of stay depressed and think, I'm missing out on the life of monasticism. No. Do you know what he did? Does anybody know? Anybody? Take a guess. No?
Did he make his own cell?
Yeah. He turned his cell up. He turned his own. Well, he turned his own room into a cell. So rather than sleep on his nice, comfortable bed, he slept on the floor. He practiced the same ascetical practices that the monks or the monastics practice, and he lived that way until his mother passed away. And then he was free from that earth, and he was able to go to the monastery and so forth. But do you see the difference? This is a man who lived with intention, and I guess it's to encourage us to do likewise. But St. John is a favourite of mine. I love St. John, but you can relate to the saints, and I'm sure you've got particular saints that you have a particular relationship with and know their life story in and out and whatever else. The beauty is to look at these saints and to see how they live their life and how we can emulate them or copy them or imitate them, like St. Paul tells us. When you enter the church, you enter as a mass, the first thing that strikes you is the beauty of the altar. That's the first thing. It's right in front of you. It's central, and it's there for a reason. It's the Holy of Holies. Okay, and it's adorned. That's where we meet Christ in the Eucharist, and it's a beautiful place. But then, second to that, what do you see? If you look all around the church, there's somebody staring back at you. There's people staring back at you. These people are the saints, right? So you've got icons on the four walls of the church. Do you know why that is? These icons are there so that no matter if you look north, east, west, or south, there's a saint staring back at you to remind you not only of their story, but to remind you of how they got there and how we can do so also. And so every time you enter the church, look at the saints and think, what did this saint do differently to make him reach his destination, and what can I do to follow like this? Now this leads us to one thing, which is, and I guess this is probably the most important aspect of the talk, is that the saints weren't born saints, obviously. They were born and they struggled in their spiritual life, and they exercised their prayer. They searched the scriptures in search of this deep relationship with God, and it took them a lot of labour and a lot of effort to get there. And that's their reward, was that God rewarded their labour of love by all the things that He gave them, whether it be miracles or whether it be having that deep relationship with God, or whether it be other things. But that's the beauty of their life, is that they dedicated their life intentionally to God, and did so by developing these habits. And these habits resulted in their walk with God and their salvation. So let's look at these habits. Like, for example, if I'm struggling with my prayer life, if I can't get up to pray every morning before I go to work, then I need to develop a habit of prayer. That's the very first step. So I guess the next couple of slides, they're very quick slides. They're just going to sort of discuss how we can develop these habits. And then once you develop the habits, you can always add to the habits, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're going back a few steps. Before we can think about resolutions, this is the way to do it. And this is, interestingly enough, this is the way that the saints or the fathers of the church teach us to do it. But even more fascinating is that today's psychotherapists, today's psychologists, the scientists of today, they're actually going back to this. So for example, I love this verse. Romans 12, verse 2. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You know, we hear this verse a lot, but it's only until recent times. I don't know if anybody here studies psychology or is in that field, but it's only until recent times that psychoanalysts or psychologists, let's just call them, have actually attested to the truth of this verse. How beautiful is that? It took them, 2,000 plus years to be able to say that this is actually, in fact, the way it is. So, you know, in terms of dealing with addictions, in terms of dealing with like emotional damage and whatever else, they actually refer to methods of renewing the mind in order to heal the mind or to retrain the mind and so forth. So I find that to be beautiful. But anyway, how do we go about setting spiritual resolutions that can actually stick? So we're only a couple of weeks into the year. If we do this right, then we're set for 2016, right? So the first step, easy step, is to plan. Has anyone heard of Stephen Covey? He's an author of the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, I think that's what it's called. One of the habits that he talks about is to begin with the end in mind. So his idea is that if you want to plan for success, whatever type of success that is, look at where you want to end up and then work your way backwards. Easy enough. So for example, if I am lacking in my prayer life, I want to look at the ideal life of prayer and then work my way back and see where I stand and where I want to be and how to bridge the gap between the two. Easy enough. It's a very simple idea. St. John Cassian also gives us a bit of advice. He says the first task is to look at the succession of obstacles to be overcome and then to examine the necessary preliminaries to success. So I'll give you an example. For example, if I want to pray every morning, and that's my issue is that I can't commit to praying every morning. For some reason, I'm always running late. Well, I'm actually always running late. So I'm out the door quickly, and I can't develop this habit of prayer in the morning. So St. John tells us to look at what the obstacles are. Why is it that I'm always running late? Try and figure out what the underlying issue is, and then solve that problem, solve that issue. Everything else should fall into place. And we'll go through a little bit more of an example later on this. So that's the first step. The second step, to cultivate the spiritual habits, is to seek guidance. Again, it's very important that we don't go ahead and plan, without the guidance of, for example, my spiritual father, because he knows me intimately. He knows me better than I know myself, right? So we need, it's a nice looking woman. So we need to be able to have an honest discussion with our spiritual guide or our spiritual father and basically ask them to contribute to this plan, right? I remember once, a couple of years back, I asked my confession father for a spiritual program. And he took a couple of weeks and then he came back to me and he's like, I've got it, here it is. And he sent it to me, he said, I'll email it, and he sent it as an email. And so when I got it, I was really excited because I've been asking about this for a while. Anyway, I opened up the program and I started to look at it, and the pride got the better of me because I saw the program and it was nice, but it was a 5-minute program. You know, I wake up in the morning, we say a couple of psalms, and that's it, I'm done for the morning. And then at night, a couple of minutes and I'm done for my evening prayer. And then in between, there was a couple of Bible readings. So inside my head I'm thinking, oh well, he obviously don't know me. But when I talk to him, I'm like, oh, this is fantastic, I want to thank you, excellent. Anyway, I tried this program. And now I understand why he said to start that way. Because he didn't want me to, it's not about what I pray and the amount that I pray. It's about actually developing a habit of prayer and then adding to the habit of prayer. And so after even trying that for a couple of weeks, I was struggling. But that's the wise way to do it. That's the way to start. To start small and sort of work your way. Who else can you seek guidance of? We've got some beautiful servants here. We won't mention names, but there's, you know, I know St. Mark's well enough to know that there's some amazing servants here that can guide you along the way. Right? What about your friends? What about your family? Have you guys heard of the quote that says you can, you're the product of the 5 people you spend most of your time with? Have you heard that?
Or show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are.
Yeah, or show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. What about with our spiritual life? The 5 people that I spend most of my time with, are they people I can get guidance from? If not, can I find another 5? I'm not saying it's your friends. Your friends are great and they're important. But I'm saying for your spiritual life, is there another couple of people that can help you along this path? Maybe not. I'm sure there is. What about the saints themselves? Could they potentially be a friend? So I guess what I'm trying to say is you can develop friendships with people who are looking down at us as well. And their lives, if you know their lives well enough, they can actually help us along the way as well. The third step, and it's not really a big step, is to actually never give up. It's not really a step, but it's just a piece of encouragement. Because here's the thing, right? We're bound to fail. I'm bound to miss a day of prayer. I'm bound to miss a day of Bible reading. I'm bound to miss, let's be honest, more than a day. And the interesting thing is, I'm sure you know this better than I do, is that the second you say to yourself, yep, I'm going to take my spiritual life seriously, and you start working on these resolutions, and hopefully you do so if you haven't already, then you know that the devil's going to fight you from the get-go. Like we said before, he's happy if you've got good intentions, as long as you're sitting on the couch and watching Friends. But the second you decide, no, I'm going to be intentional about my spiritual life, then it's a different story. You're asking for trouble. So, we're told in 1 Peter 5, chapter 5 verse 8, to be sober, to be vigilant, because our adversary, the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. It sounds scary, and it is, but of course we can't forget that what we've got on our side is not only the Lord himself, but his armies. So we've got a bigger force, basically, which is fine. So in St. John Chrysostom, he gives us a nice encouragement. He says, let no one mourn that he has fallen again and again, for forgiveness has risen from the grave. So, in a nutshell, what St. John's saying is, let's not mourn about our failures. We're bound to fail every now and then. We're only human. But, But forgiveness has risen from the dead, so we've got the ultimate source of forgiveness there, so we can rise up again, and we can try again and again and again. The only time you want to mourn is that if you fall down and you decide not to get up. That's the time to mourn. The last step, and I've touched on this again before, is to start small. So, what do I mean by that on a practical level? First of all, as we said, don't try and do anything without the guidance, without your spiritual father's guidance, or or your servant's guidance, or whatever else. And Abuna can add, if he likes, to any of this. But yeah, get guidance first before you start. But think about starting small. So as I said with my spiritual father who gave me that program, he knew very well the type of person I am, how lazy I am, and how I needed that particular program. And I'm sure your spiritual father can give you the same sort of guidance. But in terms of developing habits, and in terms of the science of habits, they've actually researched. There's quite enough research now to be able to determine how the human mind develops habits and how to get rid of old habits or bad habits and develop new habits and whatever else. There's actually a whole science behind it. But the biggest issue with resolutions, or the New Year resolutions, is that we tend to try and do a lot. You know what I mean? We tend to try and start with spiritual resolutions, like I said, whether it be attending more of the sacramental services, or praying more, or reading the Bible more, or whatever else. So that's a big change in lifestyle on its own. Plus, if you decide you want to read more, or you want to study more, or whatever else, imagine you go from December 1st to living an ordinary life to December 31st to January 1st, and it's a big shock to the system. And that's why they say that your resolutions are likely not to last, because your body, your mind can't actually cope with the change in lifestyle. So how do we start small? Like I said before, with the morning prayer, for example. So that was one example. What about reading the Bible? A lot of people that I speak to, they say, my resolution for the new year is to read the whole Bible in a year. Has anyone put that as a resolution, or anyone done that? So it's hard, right? Because you're asking for a 20-minute or half an hour commitment every day, which is great. And if you can do it, and one is supporting you, then by all means that's a fantastic thing to do. And the blessings are boundless. But what if you can't do it? What if you can't seem to commit to reading the whole Bible in a year? What about starting a bit small? What about reading a chapter a day, or half a chapter a day, or even a couple of verses a day? And to add to that, rather than say reading 3-4 chapters a day, you read half a chapter, and from that half a chapter, you can pick one verse, and from that one verse, you can try and apply it through the day. So imagine by the end of the year, 365 days later, you may not have read the whole Bible, but you may have read a few books of the Bible. And not only you read them, but you've actually lived them. You've lived them day in, day out, because you've applied the verses that you've read that day. So that's a process of change. That's a process of renewal and getting closer to God spiritually. Any questions? No? So I guess that's pretty much it, to be honest. There's just one last slide, and it's a bit of advice from St. John. Again, as you can tell by now, I like St. John. His words are wonderful. He says, "Let us not think that it's impossible to acquire such a great and good thing. It is possible, provided we have the will to be sober and vigilant. And not only this, but it is possible for us to achieve every virtue, for we are not ruled by the necessity of a blind destiny, but by free will, being free to want or not to want, to acquire good things or bad things." Okay, so I guess that's it. It was my hope that this gives you a bit of encouragement to continue along your spiritual resolutions. And if you've fallen off like me, several times by now, then it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just means that we can get up again and we can try again.